The stench of death hung heavy in the air, a cloying, putrid odor that clung to the back of my throat and refused to let go. I knelt beside the mutilated remains of what had once been a young woman, my spectral form flickering in the dim light of the alleyway. I had seen death before, had dealt it out with my own ghostly hands, but this was something different. The body had been torn apart, flesh and bone scattered in a grotesque tableau that defied all reason. I forced myself to look closer, to take in every grisly detail, knowing that even the smallest clue could be the key to unraveling the horror that had taken root in the mortal realm. As I searched, a flicker of movement caught my eye. I spun, my spectral rifle at the ready, just as a twisted shape lunged from the shadows. The creature was a nightmare made flesh, a writhing mass of teeth and claws and pulsing, cancerous growths. I opened fire, my gleaming bullets tearing through the abomination's hide in sprays of blood and shattered bone. The thing let out a shrill, unearthly scream, its body shuddering as it absorbed the impact of the shots. Then, impossibly, it surged forward, its movements jerky and unnatural, as if it were a puppet controlled by some unseen hand. I barely had time to register the shock before the creature was upon me, its jagged talons raking across my spectral form. Pain exploded through my essence, a searing agony that threatened to unmake my very being. I lashed out with the butt of my rifle, feeling the satisfying crunch of splintering bone as it connected with the abomination's skull. The creature reeled back, momentarily stunned, and I pressed my advantage. I focused my will, channeling the dark energy that coursed through my spectral veins, and unleashed a blast of searing, ghostly flames. The abomination howled as the fire consumed it, its flesh blackening and sloughing away in dripping, sizzling clumps. As the last echoes of the creature's death throes faded, I slumped against the alley wall, my spectral form flickering with exhaustion. I knew that this was only the beginning, that the shadows we had fought so hard to vanquish had found a new foothold in the mortal realm. With a grim sense of determination, I stood silently, ready to summon the rest of the Revenant Corps. We had a new mission now, a new battle to fight. The shadows were spreading, and it would take every ounce of our skill and courage to keep them at bay. As I waited for my fellow Revenants to arrive, I cast one last glance at the mutilated remains of the young woman. A flicker of sorrow passed through my spectral heart, a reminder of the price that the innocent so often paid in the eternal war against the darkness. I vowed then and there that I would not let that price be paid in vain. For we were the last line of defense, the only thing standing between the mortal realm and the abyss. And we would not fail, could not fail, as long as even one of us still drew breath. With a final, determined nod, I readied my weapon and turned to face the shadows once more. The trail of gore and horror left by the abominations led us to the heart of a forgotten city, where the shadows seemed to cling to every crumbling edifice and abandoned street. As we picked our way through the detritus of a dying civilization, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that some malevolent presence was tracking our every move. It was Private Jenkins who first noticed the signs. Strange, arcane symbols scrawled in blood on the walls of the buildings, twisted effigies of bone and flesh hanging from the streetlights. They were the markings of a cult, he said, his voice tight with a mixture of disgust and fear. We followed the trail deeper into the city, the sense of unease growing with every step. The whispers in my mind grew louder, more insistent, urging me to turn back, to flee before it was too late. But I pushed them aside, focusing on the mission at hand. As we turned a corner, we found ourselves face to face with a scene straight out of a nightmare. A group of hooded figures stood in a circle around a makeshift altar, their voices raised in a guttural chant that seemed to twist and warp the very air around them. On the altar lay the body of a young man, his chest carved open, his heart still beating in the grip of the cult leader. I felt a surge of rage and revulsion course through my spectral form, and I raised my rifle to fire. But before I could squeeze the trigger, the cult leader turned to face us, and I felt my essence run cold. It was a revenant, one of our own, but twisted and corrupted by the very darkness we had sworn to destroy. Its eyes blazed with an unholy light, and its form was wreathed in tendrils of shadow that pulsed and writhed with a sickening vitality. "Welcome, brothers and sisters," it said, its voice a twisted mockery of the one I had once known. "You're just in time for the feast." With a gesture, the corrupted revenant summoned forth a horde of abominations, their twisted forms lurching out of the shadows to surround us. I heard Captain Reynolds bellow a challenge, his battle-axe flashing in the dim light. And then the battle was upon us. I lost myself in the rhythm of the fight, my rifle spitting ghostly fire as I danced among the abominations, my spectral form phasing through their clumsy attacks. Beside me, Private Jenkins and Corporal Harris fought with a grim determination, their blades flickering in the shadows as they carved a path through the horde. But even as we fought, I could feel the darkness pressing in around us, the corrupted revenant's power growing with every passing moment. It was drawing strength from the slaughter, feeding on the pain and terror of its victims. We had to put an end to this madness. With a final, desperate surge of effort, I focused my will and unleashed a blast of searing, ghostly energy directly at the corrupted revenant. The thing let out a howl of agony as the blast tore through its spectral form, its essence unraveling in a swirl of shadows and screams. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the revenant it had once been, a glimpse of the comrade we had lost. But then it was gone, consumed by the darkness it had embraced, and the abominations it had summoned crumbled to dust and ashes. The cult members, their power broken, fled into the shadows, their anguished cries echoing through the empty streets. As the last of the screams faded, I slumped to the ground, my spectral form flickering with exhaustion and grief. We had won the battle. One of our own had fallen to the very evil we fought against, and I could feel the weight of that loss pressing down on my soul. Captain Reynolds knelt beside me, his ghostly hand resting on my shoulder. I nodded, my spectral eyes fixed on the spot where the corrupted revenant had fallen. As I looked around at the carnage we had wrought, I couldn't help but wonder how much more we would have to sacrifice before the darkness was finally vanquished. With a final, weary sigh, I pushed myself to my feet and turned to face my comrades. We had a long road ahead of us, and many more battles to fight. But as long as we stood together, as long as we held fast to our duty and our honor, I knew that we would prevail. The aftermath of our battle with the corrupted revenant and its cult hung heavy on our souls as we pressed on, following the trail of darkness and despair that seemed to permeate every corner of the mortal realm. The shadows were spreading, and with each passing day, the reports of horror and carnage grew more frequent, more desperate. We moved from one blighted city to the next, our spectral forms flickering in the gloom, our weapons always at the ready. It was in a small, forgotten town on the edge of nowhere that we finally caught up to our quarry. The corrupted revenant had been busy, leaving a trail of mutilated corpses and shattered minds in its wake. We followed the stench of death and decay to an abandoned factory on the outskirts of town, where the shadows seemed to gather like a living thing. As we approached the rusted gates, I felt a sense of dread settle over me like a shroud. The whispers in my mind grew louder, more insistent, urging me to turn back, to flee before it was too late. But I pushed them aside, gritting my teeth and readying my rifle. We entered the factory, picking our way through the maze of rusted machinery and decaying debris. The stench of blood and rot hung heavy in the air, and everywhere we looked, we saw signs of the corrupted revenant's handiwork, bits of bone and gristle, twisted effigies of flesh and metal. And then we saw them. A horde of abominations, their twisted forms lurching out of the shadows, their eyes blazing with an unholy hunger. At their head stood the corrupted revenant, its spectral form pulsing with a sickening, dark energy. "Welcome," it hissed. "You're just in time for the feast." With a gesture, the corrupted revenant sent its minions surging forward, a tide of teeth and claws and twisted flesh. We met them head-on, our weapons flashing in the gloom, our spectral forms phasing through their clumsy attacks. The battle was brutal. I lost myself in the rhythm of the fight, my rifle spitting ghostly fire, my comrades' blades flickering in the shadows. We fought with everything we had, pouring our rage and our grief into every blow, every shot. But even as we fought, I could feel the darkness pressing in around us, the corrupted Revenant's power growing with every passing moment. It was toying with us, I realized, savoring our pain and desperation like a fine wine. The corrupted Revenant was not just feeding on the suffering of its victims. It was feeding on us, on the very essence of our souls. With each blow we struck, each shot we fired, we were only making it stronger, fueling its dark power with our own spectral energy. I knew then that we had no choice. We had to put an end to this madness, even if it meant sacrificing everything we had, everything we were. With a final, desperate surge of effort, I focused my will and unleashed a blast of searing, ghostly energy directly at the corrupted Revenant. It exploded almost instantly into blood and gore, showering the floor and walls around it. It was gone, consumed by the darkness it had embraced, and the abominations it had summoned crumbled to dust and ashes. The factory was plunged into silence, the shadows receding like a tide of filth. We stood there in the aftermath, our spectral forms flickering with exhaustion and pain. We had won the battle, but at what cost? The darkness had been pushed back, but not defeated. The shadows still lurked in the corners of the world, waiting for their chance to strike again. For in the end, it was not just the fate of the mortal realm that hung in the balance. It was the fate of our very souls. And we would not rest until the shadows were banished forever, and the light of hope shone once again in the hearts of all who lived and breathed.